The last note of the Chopin prelude didn't really end. It seemed to dissolve into the cool, dark air of the empty concert hall, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier and deeper than before. It was a silence full of questions. On the stage, the woman kept her head bowed for a long moment, her rough hands now resting quietly in her lap. She looked at them as if she didn't quite recognize them. Then, slowly, she pushed the piano bench back and stood up. She didn't look at the famous pianist standing frozen in the wings. She just turned and began to walk, with that same quiet dignity, back toward the steps to leave the stage. Wait. The word came out of Kellen's mouth before he could stop it. It wasn't a command. It was a soft, almost stunned sound, like someone who'd just been woken from a deep sleep. It echoed strangely in the huge space. She stopped, but she didn't turn around. Her shoulders were tense. "Please," Kellen said, and the word felt unfamiliar in his mouth. He wasn't used to saying, "please," to the cleaning staff. He stepped out of the shadows of the wing, onto the stage proper. The ghost light cast long, dramatic shadows from both of them. That was. He couldn't find the word. Beautiful felt too small. Expert felt too cold. He was a man who worked with words like exquisite and transcendent for a living, but now they all seemed like empty, polished shells. They couldn't describe what he had just heard. "Who are you?" He finally asked, the question simple and direct. The woman finally turned to face him. In the dim light, her face was pale. The calm mask she had worn before was gone. Now she just looked very, very tired and a little embarrassed, as if she had been caught doing something she shouldn't. "Nobody," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I am just the one who cleans." "That's not true," Kellen said, taking another step closer. He pointed at the piano, the gesture urgent. "Nobody plays like that. Not without a lifetime of study. Not with that kind of feeling." She looked down at the stage floor, avoiding his gaze. A short, uncomfortable laugh escaped her. "It was nothing. A little piece from long ago. My fingers are stiff now. It was full of mistakes." "Stop," Kellen said, and his voice was firmer now, not with arrogance, but with a musician's certainty. "Do not say that. Do not insult the music, or yourself. I am Kellen Voss. I have played in every great hall on this planet. I have heard the best. And what you just did, the touch, the phrasing, that is not something you forget. That is not a little piece." He was close enough now to see the details of her face, the fine lines around her eyes, the way her hands, now clasped in front of her, were trembling slightly. This wasn't fear of him. It was something else. It was the tremor of a door being opened that had been sealed shut for a very long time. The silence stretched again. Somewhere backstage, a door slammed, and they both flinched. The real world was waiting, but it felt a million miles away. Here on the dark stage, it was just the two of them and the giant, silent piano. Kellen tried a different way. His tone softened. "What is your name?" She hesitated, then spoke so softly he had to lean in to hear. "Anya, Anya," he repeated. The name felt solid, real. "Anya, how did you learn? Where did you study?" A shadow passed over her face. It was a look of deep, old pain. "It does not matter. It was another life. A life that is finished, but it's not finished." Kellen insisted, his own passion for music rising up, drowning out his earlier boredom. "That kind of talent, it doesn't just go away. It's in your bones. I heard it. Why are you here? Why are you sweeping floors?" The question hung in the air, too direct, maybe even cruel. He saw her stiffen, and for a second, he thought she would turn and walk away, and he would never get an answer. He would be left with this mystery forever. But then her shoulders slumped, as if the fight had gone out of her. She looked past him, her eyes focusing on the dark. Empty seats of the auditorium, as if she could see the ghosts of audiences past. "I was supposed to play here," she said, her voice distant, almost dreamlike. "In this hall. A long, long time ago." Kalen felt a cold thrill run down his spine. "When?" 1978, she whispered. He did the math quickly in his head. "Over 40 years ago." "What happened?" "I was a student. At the conservatory. In my country." She didn't say which country, and he didn't ask. The old accent made sense now. There was a competition. A big one. The first prize was a debut recital, here, in Warsaw. On this stage. Her eyes flicked to the piano, then away, as if it hurt to look at it. "I won." The two words dropped into the silence like stones. "I won." Kalen could only stare. He imagined a young woman, fingers nimble and strong, full of fire and dreams, winning the chance every young musician craves. He looked at the woman before him now, in her cleaning uniform, and his mind could not connect the two images. "My parents," she continued, the words coming slowly, dragged up from a deep, dark place. "They were not in favor with the authorities. It was a difficult time. To get permission for me to travel, to take this prize. It was impossible. Then my mother became very sick. Then my father." She took a shaky breath. "They needed care. They needed someone. There were complications, political complications. If I had left, if I had taken this stage, their situation would have become much worse. Perhaps dangerous." She fell silent, and Kalen understood. He didn't know the details, and he didn't need to. He knew the story. It was an old, sad story told in 1,000 different ways across the world. The choice between a dream and a duty. Between the spotlight and the shadows. "So you stayed," he said, his voice hollow. "I stayed," she nodded. "I cared for them until they were gone. By then, the music was gone too. The window was closed. I left my country. I came here. I found work. Honest work." She gestured vaguely to her uniform. "This is my life now. It is a quiet life. It is enough. But the piano," Kalen said, gesturing helplessly. "A piano is a luxury," she said, and there was a finality in her voice. "A big, expensive thing for a small apartment. For a life of practicality. I have not touched a concert grand since I was a girl. Until tonight." She looked at him then, and her eyes were clear and sad. "It was a kind impulse to let me try. Thank you. But it was a joke for you, yes?" A little game with the cleaning woman. Kalen felt a hot wave of shame wash over him. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. That was exactly what it had been. "Anya, He started, but no apology seemed big enough. "It is fine," she said, and she even managed a small, sad smile. "It was nice. To remember. To feel it just once more. Now I must finish my work. The hall must be clean for tomorrow." She turned to go, and Kalen knew that if she walked down those steps now, the spell would be broken. The door would slam shut again forever. He couldn't let that happen. A wild, impulsive idea formed in his mind. It was reckless, probably stupid, but it felt like the only thing to do. "Wait," he said again, more forcefully. He walked quickly to the piano. "The piece you were supposed to play for your debut. What was it? Do you remember?" Anya paused, one foot on the top step. She looked back, confusion on her face. "Of course I remember. It is something you do not forget. What was it?" He demanded, his heart pounding. She said the name quietly, but the words were like a spell in the world of classical music. "Rachmaninoff." The second piano concerto. Kalin felt a jolt. It was one of the most famous, most emotionally powerful, and technically demanding concertos ever written. A mountain of a piece. Piece for a warrior of the keyboard. He looked at her, this small, tired woman in a blue uniform. He looked at the piano, and he made a decision. He sat down on the bench, right where she had been sitting. He patted the space beside him. "Come here," he said. Anya shook her head, taking a step back. "No, please, this is too much." "It's just a few notes," Kalin said, and his voice was suddenly gentle, encouraging, the way he might speak to a talented but frightened student. "Just the beginning of the first movement. Show me. I'll help you. I'll play the left hand, the orchestra part. You take the melody. Just for a minute." He began to play. Not the famous, thundering opening chords, but the soft, rippling accompaniment that comes just before the piano's first soulful melody enters. The notes flowed from his hands, filling the dark hall with a familiar aching harmony. He looked up at her. Her eyes were locked on the keyboard. He saw it, the longing, the memory, the ghost of that young girl who had won her chance. It was fighting with a lifetime of practicality and buried pain. "Anya," he said, still playing the soft, rising and falling waves of sound. "For them. For your parents. For the girl who won." A single tear traced a path down her cheek. Then, as if moving in a dream, she walked back to the piano. She sat down beside him on the bench, her body rigid. She looked at her own hands, those red, work-worn hands, and she placed them tentatively over the keys. Kalin kept playing the accompaniment, a steady, supportive river of sound. "Whenever you're ready," he murmured. "Just breathe." She closed her eyes. She took a deep, shuddering breath. And then Anya began to play. The first few notes from Anya's hands were not perfect. They were hesitant, like someone trying to speak a language they hadn't used in half a lifetime. Her fingers, stiff from a day's work and years of disuse, fumbled a little. The beautiful, singing melody of the Rachmaninoff came out in fragments, a cracked and fragile thing. Kalin didn't stop. He kept playing the steady, flowing accompaniment with his left hand, his own right hand hovering, ready to catch her if she fell. He wasn't listening for perfection. He was listening for the soul of the dot, and then something shifted. It was as if the music itself began to wake up her muscles, to bypass her tired mind and speak directly to her blood and bone. The hesitant notes began to connect. The melody started to flow, not with technical brilliance, but with a raw, aching emotion that made the hairs on Kalin's arms stand up. She wasn't just playing the notes. She was feeling them. Every rise, every fall, every moment of tension and release came from a place so deep inside her, it was almost painful to witness. This was the music of lost chances, of quiet rooms, of love that demanded sacrifice. It was all there, pouring out through her stiff fingers into the majestic piano. Kalin adapted instantly. He wasn't the star anymore. He became a partner, a supporter. He softened his playing, cradling her melody, following her lead, something he almost never did with anyone. When her rhythm wavered, he gently steadied it with his chords. When she found a surge of strength and played a phrase with more power, he matched it. Building a foundation under her dot, they were only playing a small fraction of the first movement, but it became a conversation. A conversation between a world-famous virtuoso and a cleaning lady, between the present and a ghost from the past, spoken in the only language that mattered to both of them. Neither of them had noticed the audience. The stagehand who had come to check on the ghost light had frozen in the wings, his mouth open. He had quietly signaled to another, who had fetched Kalin's manager. Now, a small group stood clustered in the shadows of the stage entrance. The manager, 2 stagehands, and the evening's head usher, an older woman with sharp eyes. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. They just watched and listened, their faces etched with disbelief. The manager's first instinct was to intervene. This was unprofessional, bizarre. His star client was sharing a piano bench with a member of the cleaning staff. But the sound stopped him. He knew music. He'd heard Kalin play this concerto with great orchestras a dozen times. This was different. This was human, fragile, and real in a way that polished perfection never was. He stood still, captivated. The usher, a woman who had seen thousands of performances in this hall, felt tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't know the story, but she could hear it. She could see the woman's worn uniform, the famous pianist's focused, humble posture. She understood she was seeing something that wouldn't ever happen again. Back on the bench, Anya was somewhere else. The dusty back rooms of the concert hall, the smell of cleaning supplies, the ache in her feet, all of it had melted away. She was in a practice room at the conservatory, the sound echoing off bare walls. She was young, her hands were smooth and strong, and her future was a bright, open road. The notes were coming more easily now, muscle memory fighting its way through the rust. But the past and present collided in a sudden, harsh way. She reached for a complex run of notes, a passage that once would have been effortless. Her tired fingers tangled. They stumbled, hitting a wrong cluster of keys that clashed horribly against Kellen's harmony. The spell shattered. The music stopped with a jolt. Anya snatched her hands back from the keyboard as if it had burned her. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The reality of where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing crashed down on her. The color drained from her face, replaced by a flush of deep embarrassment. I cannot, she stammered, her voice thick. I told you. It is gone. It is all gone. She started to stand up, her movements panicked now. Anya, look at me, Kalin said, his voice calm but firm. He didn't touch her, but his words anchored her. That was not a mistake. That was a memory. A memory your fingers haven't forgotten, but your mind is afraid of. It was wrong, she insisted, shaking her head, tears of frustration now mixing with the earlier emotion. It was ugly. I have forgotten everything. You have forgotten nothing, Kalin countered. He pointed at the piano. Do you think that matters? One tangled phrase? I have made worse mistakes in front of kings. The music you played before that was truth. That was the real thing. That is what we heard. He glanced toward the wings and saw the small group of people for the first time. For a moment, he felt a flash of his old self, annoyed at the intrusion. But then he saw their expressions. There was no mockery, no confusion. There was awe. There was respect. He turned back to Anya. The defensive, closed-off look was returning to her eyes. He was losing her. He had to make her understand. You think this is about playing every note perfectly? He asked, his tone softer. It is not. It is about what happens here. He tapped his chest over his heart. And you, Anya, you have more of that than almost anyone I have ever played with. I have performed this concerto in Berlin, in New York, in Tokyo. I have never heard the melody speak like it just did when you played it. Never. She stared at him, searching his face for the joke, the pity. She found only a startling sincerity. Why? Was all she could whisper. Because you are not playing for fame, or for a critic, or for a recording, he said. You are playing for the girl who stayed home. You are playing for her parents. You are playing for all the quiet years. That is a story the music understands. He saw her shoulders relax, just a fraction. The panic was receding, replaced by a profound exhaustion. I am so tired, she said, the words a bare sigh. I know, Kalin said. And he did. He saw it in every line of her. It was the tiredness of a burden carried for decades. He made another decision. He stood up from the piano bench. Come, sit for a moment. Just sit. He guided her gently to a wooden props box at the side of the stage. She sat down, looking small and lost. Kaylin didn't sit beside her. He walked back to the center of the stage, under the ghost light, and addressed the small audience in the wings. Could someone bring a glass of water, please? He asked, his voice carrying easily in the quiet hall dot. It was the usher who moved first, nodding and disappearing quickly. One of the stagehands, a young man with wide eyes, stepped forward. Sir, is everything? Is she all right? She is, Kaylin said. Then he looked at his manager. The man had his phone out, but he wasn't talking on it. He was just holding it, looking utterly bewildered. No pictures, Kaylin said to him, a quiet command in his tone. Not a word of this. Not yet. His manager nodded slowly, putting the phone away in his pocket. He understood that this was not a publicity stunt. This was something sacred. The usher returned with a paper cup of cool water. She walked past Kaylin and offered it directly to Anya. Here you are. My dear, she said, her voice grandmother soft. Anya took it with a murmured thanks, her hands shaking slightly as she drank. Kaylin looked from the kind usher to his chastened manager to the awestruck stagehands. The bubble of the stage had expanded. This was no longer just his and Anya's secret. It was being held quietly by this small group of night people, the ones who made the magic happen and then cleaned up after it. He walked back over to Anya. He crouched down, so he wasn't towering over her. Your hands gave you a gift tonight, he said. They remembered, and you gave one to everyone who heard it, especially to me. He paused, choosing his next words with great care. That prize you won, the debut you never had, it wasn't stolen from you. You chose to give it up for something more important. Not many people have the strength to do that. But the music you made because of that choice, the person you became, that is yours. And tonight, you shared a piece of it. Anya looked at him, the paper cup held tightly in her hands. The shame and embarrassment were finally fading from her eyes. What was left was a deep, weary sadness, but also a glimmer of something else. Something like peace. What happens now? She asked. Kaylin smiled, a real gentle smile that reached his eyes for the first time all night. Now, he said, you finish your water. Then, if you want, you can finish your work. And tomorrow, we will talk. He stood up and offered her his hand, not to pull her up, but in a gesture of respect. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. Her hand was cool and rough in his. The night's performance was finally truly over. But for the first time in a long time, Kaylin Voss felt like something real had just begun. The silence that followed their handshake was different. The shock and the raw emotion had drained away, leaving behind a quiet understanding that hummed in the air. Anya finished her water, the simple act seeming to ground her back in the real world. She placed the empty cup carefully on the props box and stood up, smoothing her uniform once more. My broom, she said softly, almost to herself. She looked toward the front row where she had left it, a symbol of her real, everyday life waiting for her in the dark. Of course, Kaylin said, stepping back to give her space. He watched as she walked down the stage steps, her movements slower now, heavy with fatigue. She picked up the broom and dustpan. She did not look back at the piano. Kaylin's manager approached him, his voice a low whisper. Kaylin, what on earth was that? Who is she? That, Kaylin said, his eyes still on Anya as she began to slowly sweep an already clean aisle, is one of the most remarkable musicians I have ever met. He turned to his manager. I need you to do something for me. No, two things. Anything. First, find out her full name and her situation. Discreetly. Talk to the hall's head of staff. Be respectful. Do not scare her. And the second? Kaylin looked around the empty, majestic hall. Cancel my morning engagements tomorrow. All of them. Clear the day. His manager blinked. You have that interview at the radio station at 10, and the lunch with the festival directors. Cancel them, Kaylin said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Something more important has come up. Back in his luxurious hotel suite later that night, the usual post-concert euphoria was absent. Kaylin couldn't sleep. The image of Anya's hands on the keys played over and over in his mind. He thought of his own life, the private jets, the five-star hotels, the constant adoration. He had worked ferociously hard, yes. He had talent, yes. But he had also never faced a choice like hers. His path had always been clear, paved with opportunity. Hers had been a path of sacrifice, chosen out of love, and it had led to a broom closet dot. It didn't feel fair. And for the first time, his own success felt a little hollow, a little lucky in a way that had nothing to do with practice. The next morning, his manager called with the information. Her name was Anya Volkova. She lived in a small, modest apartment across the river. She had worked for the concert hall's cleaning contractor for 11 years. She was known as quiet, reliable, and utterly private. No one knew about her past. Set up a meeting, Kaylin said. At the hall. In the afternoon. Somewhere private. And have a car bring her, please. Tell her I would like to talk about music. Anya arrived at the stage door in the same plain coat, her face lined with worry. She had hardly slept, convinced the previous night had been a strange dream that would now bring trouble. Perhaps she would be fired for touching the piano. Perhaps the famous man wanted to laugh at her again in the daylight dot instead. She was led not to the manager's office, but back onto the main stage. The house lights were up halfway, bathing the auditorium in a gentle golden glow. Kaylin was there, dressed casually in a simple sweater and trousers. There was no audience, no entourage. Just him, and two chairs set up near the piano. Anya, he said, standing as she approached. Thank you for coming. Please sit. She sat cautiously on the edge of the chair. You are not angry? She asked directly. Angry? Kaylin was genuinely surprised. No, I am in awe. And I am sorry for my behavior last night. It was childish and rude. She nodded slowly, accepting the apology without fuss. What is it you wish to talk about? About you, he said. About your music. I have been thinking all night. That gift you have. It shouldn't be locked away. It shouldn't only be heard by accident in an empty hall. Anya's face closed off. I am not a performer. That time is past. I am not talking about performing, Kaylin said quickly, leaning forward. Not in the way you think. Not tours and recordings and pressure. I am talking about sharing. About passing it on. He took a deep breath. The City Conservatory. I have connections there. They have a program for dedicated amateurs, for passionate older students. They need guides, not just teachers. People who understand music from the inside, from the heart, not just from a textbook. I think you could be a wonderful mentor. Anya stared at him, utterly bewildered. Me? A teacher? At the conservatory? I have no degrees, no credentials. I clean floors. You have a lifetime of understanding, Kaylin insisted. You have something no degree can give. You know what it means to choose music, and you know what it means to choose something else over music. That is a profound lesson. You could help young people find the soul in the notes, not just the technique. He could see her turning the idea, over in her mind. It was not a return to the stage, which clearly terrified her. It was a different door, one that led back to the world of music, but on her own terms. And my job? She asked quietly. My apartment? The position at the conservatory would come with a small stipend, Kalen said. Not a fortune, but enough. And as for your apartment, he paused, choosing his words even more carefully. A piano is not a luxury for someone like you, Anya. It is a necessity. Like air, I would like to arrange for one to be delivered to you. A good one, not as a gift, but as a tool. For your new work. Tears welled in Anya's eyes, but this time they did not fall. They just shimmered there. Why? She asked again, the same simple, powerful question from the night before. Why would you do this for a stranger? Kalen looked down at his own hands, the hands that had brought him fame and fortune. Because last night you reminded me why I started to play in the first place, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Before the business, before the fame. It was for the feeling. It was for the story. You have lived a story, Anya, and your music carries that weight. It made my own playing feel empty in comparison. You made me remember. This is my way of saying thank you for that reminder. It is the most valuable gift I have received in years. He stood up and walked to the piano. He lifted the fallboard, revealing the keys. And also, he said, a faint smile returning, selfishly, I would like to hear you play again. Not Rachmaninoff, not Chopin. Whatever you want, when you want, if you ever want to. He left the stage then, giving her space. He waited in the wings, just out of sight. For a long time, Anya just sat in her chair, looking at the piano, then at the empty seats. The ghosts of her past were still there, but they seemed quieter now. Less like judges, more like old friends. She thought of the young students at the conservatory, full of fire and fear, just as she had been. She thought of being able to speak to them about music, about life. She thought of a piano in her quiet apartment, not as a monument to a lost dream, but as a companion for the life she actually had. Slowly, she stood up. She did not sit at the piano bench. Instead, she walked to the instrument and placed her hand flat on its polished wood, feeling the vibration of the great hall's silence within it. Then, she turned and walked toward where Kalen waited. All right, she said, her voice clear and firm for the first time. I will try the teaching. And I would like the piano. Thank you. It was not a dramatic acceptance. It was practical, measured. But the light that had returned to her eyes was undeniable. Kalen did not shake her hand this time. He simply nodded, a deep respect passing between them. The car will take you home. Someone will be in touch about the conservatory in the next few days. As she walked away, Kalen returned to the stage. He sat at the piano, but he didn't play. He just listened to the echo of her footsteps fading away, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt like he had finally played something that truly mattered. The story of what happened on the stage that night did get out, of course. You cannot contain a secret shared by so many hearts. The stagehand who had watched, too moved to stay completely quiet, told his girlfriend. The usher told a fellow music lover over tea. The story spread, not as a news report, but as a modern fable, whispered from one person to the next. A story about hidden genius, about arrogance turned to humility, about a chance meeting that changed two lives. But it did not spread in the way Kellen's manager had originally feared, or perhaps secretly hoped for, as a viral sensation. There was no slickly edited video set to dramatic music. The phone footage that existed remained blurry, dark, and respectfully private. The story carried its own power without needing pictures. The newspapers called it The Duet of Dignity. Music blogs wrote long pieces about lost prodigies and second chances. For a few weeks, there was a storm of attention. Reporters waited outside the concert hall. They found Anya's apartment building, but she did not come out to speak to them. She kept the curtains drawn and continued, for the time being, her cleaning shifts. The hall's management, to their credit, protected her fiercely, allowing no one to harass their staff. Kalin gave one short, careful interview. He did not speak of pity or of a discovery. He spoke of respect. "I was the student that night," he said simply. She reminded every musician what we are truly searching for when we play. It is not applause. It is connection. It is truth. He refused to answer any more personal questions about her, and slowly, the storm of cameras and microphones moved on to the next thing. The world's attention is a bright, hot light, but it does not stay in one place for long. In the quiet that followed, the real work began. Anya's piano arrived on a crisp autumn morning. It was a sturdy, beautiful upright, not a giant concert grand that would overwhelm her small living room. It fit perfectly by the window. When the delivery men left, she sat before it for a full hour, not playing, just looking. Then she played a single scale. The sound was warm and true, filling the spaces of her quiet home with something that had been missing for decades. It was not a sound of triumph, but of homecoming. A week later, she met with the director of the city conservatory, a kindly older man with a deep love of music history. Kalin had paved the way, but it was Anya who won the position. She spoke to the director, not about technique or theory, but about the color of different chords, and how a melody could feel like a memory. She talked about the weight of silence between the notes. He offered her a role on the spot, a special guide for artistic interpretation. It was a fancy title for a simple idea. She would listen to students play and talk to them about the story behind the music, and the story they wanted to tell with it about her first day was terrifying. Standing in a small teaching room, facing a brilliant, skeptical 19-year-old who could play dazzlingly fast, Anya's throat went dry. The boy played a complex etude, a whirlwind of perfect notes. When he finished, he looked at her with an expression that asked, "Asterisk well?" "Asterisk. That was very impressive," Anya said, her voice soft. "Your fingers are excellent. Now, why are you angry?" The boy blinked, stunned. "I'm not angry. The music," Anya said, gesturing gently. "It is a storm, yes, but it is also sad. A passionate sadness. You played only the storm. What are you sad about?" The boy, who had practiced the piece for months, thinking only of speed and accuracy, was silent. Then, haltingly, he began to talk about the pressure, the competition, the fear of not being good enough. Anya simply nodded. "Good," she said. "Now, play it again. Play it for that fear." He did. It was slower. It had mistakes. But for the first time, it had a heartbeat. Word spread among the students. If you want to learn how to make the music mean something, go see the quiet lady in room 4.Ka ELEN. Meanwhile, found his own work changing. He still performed the great concertos, but he approached them differently. He found himself listening more, both to the orchestra and to the quiet voice of the music itself. He started a small, informal series of master classes at the conservatory, not for the star pupils, but for the ones in the middle, the ones who had passion, but maybe not flawless technique. He and Anya never played together publicly again. That one duet in the empty hall was theirs alone, a perfect private monument. But sometimes, if he was in the city and visiting the school, he would pop his head into her teaching room. He would listen for a moment as she gently spoke to a student, and he would give her a small, almost invisible nod. She would return the slightest of smiles. One afternoon, about a year later, Kalin was walking through the conservatory's courtyard. He heard piano music coming from an open window above. It was a slow, simple piece by Schumann, one often played by beginners. But the playing was not beginners' playing. It was thoughtful, tender, each note placed with loving care. He knew it was her. He didn't go up. He just stood under a bare tree and listened. He thought about the journey of that piece, from Schumann's heart to the page, to the fingers of a young woman in a conservatory long ago and far away. 2 decades of silence, and now here, in this air, played for no one but herself. It was a complete circle. It was more satisfying than any standing ovation he had ever received. For Anya, life did not become a fairy tale. She still lived in her same apartment. She still budgeted carefully. The past was still the past, with all its old aches. But it was no longer a locked room inside her. Now she could visit it, through the music, and then close the door, and return to a present that had meaning. She had found a purpose. She was not a star, but a guide. She was a lantern, not a spotlight. And for someone who had spent so long in the shadows, that was exactly the right kind of light. One evening, Kalin was preparing for a concert in another country. In his hotel room, he video called his manager. After the business was done, his manager hesitated. "I heard from the conservatory director today," the manager said, "about Anya." Kalin's heart, for a ridiculous second, tightened with fear. "Is she all right?" "More than all right," the manager said, and Kalin could hear the smile in his voice. "They said the students line up for her guidance sessions. They say she has a way of untangling the music from their fears. They've made her role permanent. They even asked if she'd consider giving a small talk to the new students next term about the relationship between life and art." Kalin leaned back, a deep sense of peace settling over him. "She'd be wonderful. You changed her life, you know," the manager said. "Not for the first time." Kalin shook his head, looking out the window at the foreign city lights. "No," he said softly, with utter conviction. "We met each other at a crossroads. I pointed down a road she was already strong enough to walk. But she changed my direction. She reminded me what the destination was supposed to feel like." Back in her apartment, Anya finished playing the Schumann piece. The last note faded into the sound of the evening traffic outside. She closed the piano lid and ran her hand over the smooth wood. On top of it, in a simple frame, was a photograph. It was not of her as a young student. It was a recent picture, taken by one of the conservatory staff during an outdoor gathering. In it, she is sitting at a garden table, surrounded by 3 of her students who are laughing about something. She is smiling too, a real relaxed smile that reaches her eyes. It is the smile of someone who is exactly where they are meant to be. She looked from the photograph to the piano, and then to her own hands. They were still red, still marked by a lifetime of work. But now they were also something else. They were teachers' hands. They were storytellers' hands. The famous pianist's challenge, made as a joke on a dark, empty stage, had set in motion a chain of events. But it did not end with a stunned audience or a viral video. It ended quietly, in moments like this, with a feeling of quiet usefulness, with music played for its own sake, and with the profound understanding that sometimes the most stunning thing is not a performance, but a person finally coming home to themselves. And in the end, that was a story more beautiful than any concerto.